Welcome back, Focus Learners. Get ready for a truly fascinating explainer today. We are exploring a wild moment in American history where gritty, true crime literally collided with the highest levels of our government. We're going to look at the infamous Abscam scandal, and specifically, we're going to examine what happens when a career con artist is brought in to completely reshape how the FBI conducts its undercover operations. It's a massive story of greed, incredibly complex legal defenses, and some serious institutional fallout that changed the rules for federal law enforcement forever. Okay, let's dive right into this. Listen to this incredibly blunt assessment from a guy named Mel Weinberg. Now, Weinberg was not an FBI agent, okay? He was actually a career swindler, a con artist from the Bronx who was facing some very serious prison time. But he struck this remarkable deal with the government. In exchange for a sentence of probation and a cool $150,000, Weinberg was hired by the FBI back in the late 1970s to help design and run a massive sting operation. And, he had absolutely zero sympathy for the politicians who fell into his trap. He basically said, why is he taking orders from a hood like me? He always could have said no. Section 1, the Abscam sting operation, fake sheiks and real bribes. So, to set the stage here, the FBI created this totally fictitious Arab company called Abdul Enterprises. The setup was that they were offering politicians massive investments, but only if they agreed to take cash bribes up front. And it worked. But this immediate success triggered a massive legal and ethical debate centered around one core concept: entrapment. When those hidden camera tapes rolled, defense lawyers obviously cried foul. They raised an absolutely critical question. Did the FBI simply catch corrupt politicians who were already breaking the law, or did they actually overstep and illegally create crimes that otherwise never would have happened? To really understand the entrapment defense, we have to look at this fascinating split in how the courts actually view it. It's kind of like a giant legal puzzle. On one side, you have this view championed by Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis in a famous 1928 dissent. He argued that, sure, the government can set decoys, but it absolutely cannot provoke or create a crime and then punish the criminal. Why? Because the criminal is essentially the government's own creation at that point. But, on the other side, we have the majority standard, which is what courts actually use today. This standard says that government misconduct isn't the only factor. You really have to look at the target's predisposition. Basically, if the target was already willing and eager to commit the crime, then the government's lure is legally totally acceptable. Section 2. Catching Senator Harrison Williams, a tragic fall from grace. Now, what's really interesting here is our primary case study, the highest-ranking target ensnared by the whole Abscam sting, four-term New Jersey Democratic Senator Harrison Pete Williams. The trap they set for Williams and how he responded to it was incredibly complex. You see, when other politicians in the sting, like Representative Richard Kelly or Councilman Harry Giannotti, were offered cash, they eventually just took the cash. But Williams? He was different. As a highly educated, seasoned senator who had championed some major social welfare laws, his interactions with these fake sheiks were cautious and multi-layered. But, as the videotapes ultimately proved, caution definitely did not mean innocence. So, the absolutely crucial point here is how Williams actually tried to outsmart the sting. When the FBI offered him direct cash, he said no. But, and here's the kicker, he didn't walk away. Instead, he proposed a highly sophisticated alternative. He suggested that the sheikh invest in companies financed by a venture capital partnership. Specifically, he targeted a titanium mine in Virginia and a processing plant in Georgia. He even arranged it so his longtime friend and lawyer Alex Weinberg would act as a frontman, setting up corporations where Williams would hold a hidden 18% ownership stake. So the benefit to the senator wasn't some sketchy briefcase full of cash. It was a massive influx of stock value, and it was all caught right there on FBI videotape. Section 3. The entrapment defense, pleading the linguistic case. Facing all that damning video evidence, Williams pleaded not guilty. His legal team obviously couldn't just deny the tapes existed, so they took a highly novel approach. They claimed he was psychologically coached and manipulated by Weinberg. To try and prove this, the defense actually brought in a linguistics expert from Georgetown University, Professor Roger Shu. Professor Shu broke down the tapes into a strict linguistic taxonomy, essentially charting how many times Williams introduced a topic versus the undercover FBI agents. Following a four-step conclusion, the defense basically framed Senator Williams as a mere passive conversationalist. They argued that, linguistically speaking, Williams never explicitly linked his legislative power to a bribe. He was just politely agreeing with these aggressive agents to keep the conversation flowing. But you really have to contrast that very academic defense with just plain common sense. During the subsequent Senate hearings, Senator Howell Heflin brutally mocked this whole linguistic theory. He constructed this hypothetical dialogue. Hello, I brought the money. All you need to do is vote for X. Goodbye. Heflin pointed out that under the linguist theory, the person receiving the money in that scenario could technically be considered an innocent, passive participant just because they didn't initiate the sentences. I mean, it was kind of absurd. As Heflin correctly noted, a United States senator could have at any point simply said, look, this is illegal and I'm leaving. But Williams never did.
Section 4. The politics of expulsion, a battle for the Senate seat.
So, having lost in federal court, Williams now faced an ethics committee hearing and the very real threat of losing his seat. The Senate basically faced a choice between two sanctions. The first was expulsion. This is an incredibly brutal and rare sanction that was last used for high treason during the Civil War. I mean, removing a duly elected senator is an extreme measure. The alternative was censure. This is a severe public reprimand, but the senator actually gets to keep their seat. Historically, censure had been the preferred punishment for financial misconduct, like campaign finance violations. For Williams, aiming for a censure was really his only realistic political lifeline. But here's the thing. To get a censure, you generally have to show at least some contrition. Instead, Williams made a fatal political error. He stood up and declared to his peers, I know that I am completely innocent of all crime and impropriety. He didn't even focus his defense on the broader constitutional dangers of the executive branch running undercover stings on the legislative branch, which honestly was an argument that actually might have swayed his colleagues. By stubbornly refusing to admit any guilt whatsoever, he completely alienated his peers and just blew his chance at a lesser sanction. Seeing that the votes were overwhelmingly against him, even from his fellow New Jersey senator, Williams decided to resign on March 11, 1982, right before the expulsion vote could even take place. And that number right there, 06089-050, that became his new identity. He went from being one of the absolute most powerful men in Washington, D.C., to serving 2 years in a federal prison alongside a $50,000 fine. It was actually the very first time in more than 80 years that a sitting senator had spent time in prison. Section 5. Rewriting the FBI Rulebook, Institutional Fallout. And this brilliantly illustrates the real, lasting impact of the whole thing. The Abscam scandal wasn't just some gripping true crime story. It triggered massive institutional changes at the DOJ to ensure a Wild West operation like this never happened again. They implemented a strict new hierarchy, dividing undercover operations into 2 tiers. Group I operations are the highly sensitive ones. So if a sting involves an elected official, a foreign government, or a religious organization, it can't just be approved locally anymore. It has to go all the way up to FBI headquarters and a special DOJ review committee. Then you have Group 2 operations, which are your standard undercover stings. Those can be approved by a local special agent in charge, provided they stay under strict time and budget limits, like under $100,000 for 6 months. But of course, these guidelines aren't just static. They adapt. Fast forward to May 2002, following the 9/11 attacks, and the focus shifted drastically toward terrorism prevention and intelligence gathering. They gave local special agents in charge emergency approval powers specifically for terrorism cases, just so they wouldn't lose critical investigative windows. They also raised the Group 2 operational limit to $50,000. But even with these expanded powers, they maintained strict oversight, explicitly classifying potential civil liability actions as sensitive to keep federal agents in check. Ultimately, the Abscam scandal forced us to define the actual boundaries of law enforcement. Yes, it gave us stricter FBI guidelines, and yeah, it ended the careers of some very powerful politicians. But it really leaves us with a lingering philosophical question, one that Justice Brandeis wrestled with a whole century ago. When the government creates the temptation, when it designs the absolute, perfect, irresistible trap, who is truly responsible for the crime? Is it the corrupt politician who takes the bait, or is it the government that manufactured the opportunity in the first place? Think about that, Focus learners. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.